I realized that when I was burned out, it didn't mean that happiness was out of my reach. It just meant that in this particular episode of the span of my life, this was the challenge. This was the burden that I was to go through. Hey guys, welcome to Resiliency Rounds. And on our episode today, we're going to be talking about happiness.
In full disclosure, though, this is our second recording because the first one we weren't very happy about.
Yeah, it turns out happiness is a fairly complicated subject.
That's right. And but before we start, Eddie, did you get any sleep last night?
I got a little bit of sleep last night.
Yeah, why is that?
Yeah, I didn't get the normal amount of sleep that I usually get. And you would know the answer because because you and I stayed up late, just a couple of rambunctious, rebellious philosophers debating on the nature of happiness. It's what we hard partiers do.
With all our claims about temperance and moderation, huh?
I think we can maybe talk a little bit about what we're about to talk about. Because happiness is a very, as we've learned, a very complex, multidimensional concept. But I think just to kind of lay it out, we're going to talk about what we mean by happiness, because that's very important. There's a lot of misconceptions there. And we're going to talk about some of the philosophical framework of happiness and how, at least I think we're going to talk mostly about how Aristotle viewed it.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think we're also going to talk about it from our perspective. Like, what are the practical applications of this philosophy?
Yeah, I was going to say, and that was next. And so, and then we're going to layer in our personal experiences and the practical applications, and with me in particular about, once I did this reading, my focus was then on what did I learn? What insights did I gain from this reading that applied to my experiences when I was burned out? Like, what could I have taken from that? And so those are going to be the things that I focus on. So let's kick things off. And so we'll just start off with, what is happiness? Simple question, right? What is it? So how do you want to approach this? Do you want to start off with saying what it's not?
Yeah, so I think when we discussed about this, one of the things that really struck me about what I didn't know personally about happiness was that what I, as a human, as a rational being, thought of happiness, I thought of it as a fulfillment of desire. What I was told while I was growing up and all through my life was that if you have a want and that want is fulfilled, you're going to be happy. And I misunderstood happy to be happiness. Let me put it another way. I never thought about it. I never thought that there is actually a difference between happy and happiness. All I knew was that if you have a want and want goes unfulfilled, you're not happy, you're sad. And if you have a want and the want is fulfilled, you're happy. That's all. And and I felt that was all there is to know about happiness. And I went through life figuring out what those things were that are wants. Now, as a child, children are fairly simple. They have simple wants, and we've all seen this. With our children, if they want a certain thing, you get it for them, they're happy, right? And how long does that happiness last? It lasts for a few days. If it's a gaming console or a toy or an ice cream, all of these things are just short-lived happiness, and they can go immediately from a state of happiness to a state of unhappiness over small things, and it's very ephemeral, it's very temporal.
Right. So the fulfillment of immediate wants, and that's not the happiness that we're talking
That's
about.
not the happiness we're talking about.
Right.
Now, again, I think you had mentioned this when it came to time about micro concepts of happiness, of time, and macro concepts of time. And I think we can break happiness down in micro happy and macro happiness, where you talk about micro happy in short temporal phases, and happiness that kind of spans over time.
Yeah.
And I think what's going to happen through this podcast,
that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
is we're going to be probably talking about it in those terms as well, because I think both of those are equally they're not equally important. Both of those are important to understand, though. So initially, I thought it was all just micro happy. That was all there is to happiness, and I thought that if you have enough micro happy, you're going to have happiness
right.
over a lifetime. So, what are your initial experiences with this concept?
Well, so I would agree. I think largely my experience with happiness has been, well, I put it simply and shortly like this. Before I'd done this deep reading on happiness, I had a sense for what happiness was, but I couldn't define it. The way I explained it is, if I didn't have to explain what happiness was, I knew exactly what it was in my head. I thought I knew what it was. But if somebody asked me, like if my son asked me, so what's happiness? All of a sudden I get tongue-tied. It's very hard to describe because it's, everybody defines it a different way. And then how do you explain what happiness is? How do you explain the difference between the satisfaction of immediate pleasures and just a happy life? So if you don't ask me what happiness is, this is pre-reading. If you didn't ask me what happiness was, I got it. But as soon as you asked me, I lost it. I couldn't explain it. But based on the reading that I made and on our conversations, I've come to understand happiness as a quality of a whole life, as a complete life.
Macro happiness.
Macro happiness, which I think that is the pressing happiness. That is the important happiness. That is the happiness that we're aiming toward.
Everything we do in the pursuit of macro happiness.
Right. And so happiness is the quality of a whole, complete life. And if it happens to have been well lived, if it's been a good life, then that is happiness. Mm-hmm. And that's tricky. And that was a concept that I struggled with when I was first reading through this, because I was thinking, well, can't you achieve happiness before you die? Mm-hmm. And the short answer is no.
Macro happiness? No.
We're talking about macro happiness, right? So the short answer is no, because you don't know if you've achieved happiness until the very end. I mean, at best, it's something that you're looking back on, in the very, very last months, of your life. You're looking back retrospect. It's a retrospective diagnosis. And why is it looked at it that way? It's because we're all going to go through joy. Mm-hmm. We're all going to have good things that happen. We'll have successes.
Happiness.
We'll have triumphs. But we're also going to have tragedy. Mm-hmm. There's going to be pain. Mm-hmm. There's going to be grief. Mm-hmm. There's going to be failures in our life. Mm-hmm. But regardless of whether good things or bad things happened in our life, they can still result in a good life. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. So happiness has more to do with the choices we make and the actions we take. So, the analogy, a movie would be a good example. Isn't this a great movie? We're like, well, let's just wait and see how it ends, right? You need to know the ending of the movie before you can say, yeah, this is a great movie. That's what life is. Life is the movie. Life is the movie, and you don't know if it's good until the end. And so macro happiness, that is the nature of macro happiness.
Right.
And so understanding that, now you have kind of this navigation point. Understanding happiness in that way as a retrospective diagnosis, as a feature of a complete whole life, that informs now your approach to life. Mm-hmm. Because your goal is not to avoid pain, and your goal is not to overindulge in pleasure. Your goal at this point then is to make decisions and act on them in a way that you're doing the greatest good. Because at the end happiness is good. Happiness is goodness. What do you think about that?
Well, I guess that last statement is very, very heavy. It's very difficult to kind of unpack that. But I wanted to ask you, so first of all, I agree, completely with this macro happiness concept and the way you described it, like, having the movie analogy, I think was great. But there is something to be said about desires and meeting your desires, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
So, meeting your desires. So, looking at so here's what I have to say about that. Meeting your desires can make you happy. But you always have to keep in mind, once you're aware of this concept of the macro happiness, you have to keep that in mind when you're deciding between micro choices on happiness or micro happiness. Because, here's an example. You can have two choices in front of you. Both of them could be good. One choice could be, I can have an extra piece of cake after dinner. Or I could call it good and go home and have my evening walk before I go to bed. Those are two choices. And let's just, for the sake of argument, say that you really enjoy taking walks. Okay? So now you have two choices. Both of them are going to result in something good happening. Now you have a choice to make. You can choose to take an extra piece of cake, which in the short term is going to be delicious, right? And then you're going to get that big fat sensation in your belly, and this is going to be great, right? Maybe have a cup of coffee with it. It's going to be awesome. But then, you took in all this extra sugar, all these extra calories. So the long-term result is probably not good when you look at it with respect to the immediate result. But if you make the other choice, which is, I'm going to take a walk, get some fresh air, watch the sunset, take in some natural beauty. So that choice is not as immediately pleasurable, but it probably has greater good associated with it. And so in the universe where our hypothetical person eats that extra piece of cake, they probably contributed, they both got the micro happiness, but the one who took the cake probably added very little on their path to the macro happiness, and the one who went for the walk added more. That's the way I would look at it.
So what you're trying to say essentially is that the micro happiness, it feels like it's good. No one's going to argue that eating a piece of cake after dinner, as long as you're not eating a whole cake every day after dinner, or your dinner is the cake, right? There's nothing wrong with it. You can enjoy a piece of cake. But what is good, or what seems to be a good today, may turn out to be not so good in the future. And what is not so good today may turn out to be a great good in the future. And the ability to differentiate between what is good and what is not good is wisdom. In order to know how to make that choice is important. See, this is an easy example, I would think, right? Most of the audience or most people listening to this are going to say, obviously I'm going to skip the cake and I'm going to take a walk.
For sure, yeah.
But sometimes it's not that easy.
Often it is. Most of the time it isn't.
It isn't
We're
easy,
simplifying for the sake of just explaining things, but yeah,
so the
right.
person who is going into a medical career and is being told by everybody in society that if you become a physician, you are going to achieve the pinnacle of what human professionals have to offer, or life has to offer for a professional. That's it's the most noble profession, and you embark on this profession, and now your life becomes a series of goods you believe to be goods. Graduating out of medical school, good. Getting into a residency, good. Getting into a fellowship, good. Getting a job, good. These are all goods that you're pursuing. But eventually, at some point, you realize that now you have all of this debt that you've accrued, all of this time that you have lost, all of this stress and burden that your job provides you. And unfortunately for some people, there's also a lack of satisfaction in their profession. It didn't turn out to be what they were expecting,
right,
because of systemic factors, because of personal factors. And so what they initially thought was good turned out to be not so good. And it's very difficult to know. So there is that concept to it. But who gets to say whether eventually at the end of life, from a macro happiness standpoint, when you look back at your life, you won't look at your life and say, yes, I started off thinking I'm doing good, turned out to be not so good, but then I righted the ship.
Yeah.
I learned from, when I went through that first storm, I learned how to navigate the next storm. And I realized not to judge myself too much. And I realized how that this is not just the system, and it is me.
Man, that's exactly right. Like, yes. As we move in the direction of things that we think are going to make us happy, micro or macro, we incur pain or suffering, toil, burden. And when we lose sight of what our aim is, if we're making choices that are not based on, as you said, wisdom, but you could also add virtue to that, right? So if you're not making choices based off of, and we'll elaborate more on this in future episodes, but if you're making choices that are not based on temperance, if you're making choices that are avoiding courage, if you're making choices that are avoiding justice, then yeah, it's easy to lose sight of that. And it's because happiness is consistent with virtue. So it's very possible. So in terms of the take home that I have for this is when I look at this concept of happiness and then say, okay, what did I learn from this and how does it apply with my own experiences with burnout? This was what I realized. And it parallels quite a bit with what we talked about at the very beginning. It places those experiences appropriately for me. I realized that when I was burned out, it didn't mean that happiness was out of my reach. It just meant that in this particular episode of the span of my life, this was the challenge, this was the burden that I was to go through. And so the next time that I'm facing burnout, I know that the way to navigate through it is to make choices based on virtue and to take actions based on virtue. And to be frank, it ties in a little bit with what we're doing here. We're sharing our experiences. I think what we're doing is translating that experience into something potentially positive for somebody else. And there's virtue in that. So it's resulting in, we're flipping the script. We're finding that, yeah, this bad thing happened, but so what? How I react to it is what matters. And happiness, we still don't know how this movie ends. And I'm going to do my best for a good ending to the movie.
That's right. So, yes, just from a very practical perspective,
yeah.
If you are this person, I can talk about myself. So I went through medical training, I went through a residency, a fellowship, very prolonged training period, and came out at the other end and found myself burnt out and without any direction. And when I went through this process of introspection, prior to that, I was just carrying this big weight on me, this weight of anxiety. Freud says that the opposite of happiness is not tragedy, it's neurosis. Mm-hmm. And that's what I was having. I was this anxiety, this unease. Like, how come I don't know, simple questions about life? Like, where am I headed? Where am I going? Where is all this headed? Why am I not happy? Why am I not happy? I didn't have this idea. I didn't have this concept of macro happiness. I was like, why am I not happy all the time? Why did these fleeting moments of happy just going away? This micro happiness. I just thought micro happiness, was macro happiness. And that just came crashing down on me when I found myself without direction, without control. And when I introspected and I righted my ship, which I'm still struggling with it. I'm still figuring out how to do it.
Yeah.
But I looked back at all the things that I had done wrong, and then I decided to become moderate, temperate with my time, temperate with my lifestyle, temperate with my exercise, temperate with my passions, temperate with my ambition. When I decided that I need to trust people and treat them just with treat them with fairness. People who I work with, no matter whether they are physicians, surgeons, they are my staff. I try my best to be as fair as I can, as just as I can, and it's a struggle. I struggle with it sometimes. I sometimes take out my frustrations on people when they don't deserve it. I try to be just with my family, give them enough time, give my wife enough time to express herself as a human being. I decided that I'm going to have the courage to stand up against the societal norms and pressures. And yes, that requires to know what is right and what is wrong. And that requires reading. It all started once I realized that I didn't know anything. I didn't know any of these things. I didn't even know these concepts existed. And when I realized that I didn't know anything, then I realized that I was a flawed human being and I could make these mistakes and there was no pressure on me anymore. How can I expect to excel when I have no baseline information? How can I expect to survive if I don't have basic training? And I started on this path. I started from zero. I'm building small blocks every day. And I can tell you that process is bringing me happiness. These are the foundations of macro happiness that you can build every day. You're right. Happiness has a retrospective connotation to it. If this is a movie, this is the middle of this movie. Yeah. But I can tell you that for me, this movie is going somewhere.
Yeah.
And even if it ends now, at least I can tell myself that I spent my waking hours since I had my introspection. I spent every day trying to get just a little bit better. I challenge myself every day. And believe me, it might sound like it is fatiguing to put yourself through this, but it's absolutely not. It's liberating. It's weightlessness. I'm being cradled like you were being cradled last night by your own self. I cut myself slack. If I lose my temper, I cut myself slack. But guess what? I realize that I did it. And I make a promise to myself that it's not going to happen again. I know it's going to happen again. But every time I lose my tempers after that, I can get back. I can apologize. I don't blame the other person for my faults anymore. And I don't blame myself for my faults anymore either. I learn from my faults. I take every failure as not a failure, but as an opportunity to learn. What I'm trying to get at is, in this journey as a physician, we could be burnt out. And as a surgeon, we could be burnt out. If we don't take a step back, don't moderate ourselves, don't act courageously, are not just, like you said, to ourselves, to our family, to the loved ones, people we care about, and we don't acquire wisdom, we will keep continuing to get burnt out, and we are not going to have a chance at macro happiness. But if we take a step back and do the things that we need to do, the virtues, these are the virtues: justice, temperance, courage, and wisdom. If we act according to that, you are right. That is the way for macro happiness. And guess what? Maybe you're not going to have some of the micro happiness that...
Yeah, you may have a lot of pain in that process.
It may happen.
But pain has nothing to do with happiness.
No.
Suffering has nothing to do... And that was the part that I struggled with. And I want to get a little bit meta, but the other advantage, the other benefit from you embarking on this introspective process, you ran into me at just the right moment.
Yes.
And look at us. Yes. Look at what we're talking about. We're like... But Here's what I wrote in my journal, because in terms of the virtues and how you view burnout through the lens of the virtues. And what I wrote was that despite the suffering associated with burnout, it does not interfere with my struggle for happiness as long as I navigate the pain with virtue. Where temperance is needed, don't miss the opportunity to show restraint. Where courage is needed, look beyond the fear and act. And where justice is required, seek fairness. Fight for fairness. Because it's impossible to have too much justice, right? Justice is that thing that it's like there's no way to have too much justice. And man, you've told me about this before, and I've heard it, but I've never actually listened to it. It's never hit my heart until last night. And how much injustice do we see, man?
Yeah.
How much injustice do we see?
It's tremendous. And that's the thing. And that's the reason why we are burnt out. We see it. We close our eyes to it. We turn away from it. And then we ask ourselves, why are we not happy? What we mean by that. And we try to substitute this unhappiness with micro happiness. Oh, I'll get myself a new car.
Yeah.
I'll take a trip. I'm gonna buy a bigger house. And you realize that you do all of those things, you're still empty inside. Because you're turning our back to virtue. And of all the virtues, yes, as a physician, as a surgeon, as a justice is what you need to strive for. Because we are in a profession for others.
Right.
And if you are not just in your practice, you are no longer in a profession for others, you're in a profession for yourself. And that would never, even in life, even if you're not a physician, if you don't have justice in the way you deal with yourself and others, you're going to find that you're not going to be happy. We need to right our ships, and we need to sail toward happiness. And you know what's fueling the sails? It's virtue.
Yeah.
As long as we are in the direction of virtue, we are sailing towards happiness. If we are in the direction of vice, we are moving away from it. That's all we need to decide to do, man.
So, we need to write a good ending to this movie. Let's do it.
So, yeah, this is it.
Don't forget to look us up and subscribe to our podcast and leave us an honest 5-star rating. But really at this point, any feedback would be greatly appreciated. And as always, we will include relevant information in our show notes wherever possible.
So we have a Twitter handle, we have a Facebook page, we also have our Gmail account, resiliencyrounds@gmail.com. So shoot us some questions, give us some feedback there, and we'll be happy to get back in touch with you.
All right, guys. Until next time.
Yeah, thank you.